Alright, let's dive into this because Tony is one of those movies that's got me thinking, and not just about Anthony Bourdain, but about how we tell stories based on real lives. Here's the thing. This film isn't called Kitchen Confidential, even though that's the book that put Bourdain on the map. And personally, I think that's a genius move.
Why?
Because Tony isn't trying to be a literal retelling of Bourdain's life. It's not even really about Bourdain, at least not in the way you'd expect. What makes this really interesting is how the movie takes a step back from the biopic formula. Instead of hitting us over the head with "look at this future celebrity," it focuses on a young, unformed Tony Bourdain, played by Dominic Sessa, who's more of a mess than a hero. And honestly, that's what makes it work. Here's the hook. Tony is a coming-of-age story, but it's not your typical destined-for-greatness narrative. This Tony is a college student who thinks he's got it all figured out. He's an aspiring writer, full of big ideas and even bigger ego. But the reality? He's all talk. One thing that immediately stands out is how the movie doesn't shy away from making him unlikable. He's cocky, he's lying to impress a girl, and he's basically flailing through life. But here's where it gets fascinating. Despite all that, you can't help but root for him.
Why?
Because he feels real. He's not some polished version of a future celebrity. He's just a guy trying to figure it out, and that's something we can all relate to. Now, let's talk about the kitchen scenes, because this is where the movie really shines. Antonio Banderas plays this composite chef character, who's part mentor, part father figure. And honestly, Banderas is so good here that you forget he's basically a fictional invention. What many people don't realize is how hard it is to pull off a character like this without it feeling cheesy. But Banderas nails it. He's gruff but kind, and he gives the kitchen scenes this grounded, authentic energy. It's not just about the cooking, it's about the culture, the chaos, and the way it transforms Tony. And that's where the movie's magic lies. It's not about Bourdain's genius, it's about how he found his path through the messiness of life. But here's a detail I find fascinating. The movie barely touches on Provincetown's history as a gay haven. Personally, I think that's a missed opportunity. If you take a step back and think about it, Bourdain's story is deeply tied to counterculture and rebellion, and Provincetown is a huge part of that. So, why gloss over it? Maybe it's because the movie is so focused on Tony's personal journey that it doesn't want to distract from that. Or maybe it's just a blind spot. Either way, it's a choice that stands out, and not necessarily in a good way. Now, let's talk about the girl, Nancy, played by Emilia Jones. Her character is kind of stuck in this awkward position. She's there to drive Tony's story forward, but ultimately, she's disposable to the larger narrative. And that's a shame, because Jones gives a great performance. She's the one who sees the good in Tony, even when he's at his worst. But the movie kind of sidelines her, which feels a little unfair. In my opinion, it's one of those moments where the biopic formula shows its limits. When you're telling a story about a real person, some characters end up feeling like footnotes, even if they're important to the person's life. What this really suggests is that Tony is at its best when it's not trying to be a tribute to Anthony Bourdain. It's better as a standalone coming-of-age story. The moments where it tries to connect to Bourdain's legacy, like that line about raw oysters tasting like the future, feel forced. Honestly, when Sessa delivers that line, it lands with a thud. It's like the movie is trying too hard to remind us, hey, this guy becomes Anthony Bourdain. But we don't need that. We're already invested in Tony's journey because it's so relatable. If you take a step back and think about it, Tony is a reminder that sometimes the best way to honor a true story is to let go of the facts. Director Matt Johnson doesn't try to recreate Bourdain's life. He captures the feeling of it. And that's what makes this movie work. It's not about the details. It's about the transformation. Tony starts as this aimless, self-important kid, and by the end, he's still not a genius, but he's on his way. And that's the beauty of it. It's not about destiny, it's about the journey. So here's my closing thought. Tony isn't a perfect movie, but it's a bold one. It takes risks, it avoids the biopic traps, and it gives us a protagonist who's deeply flawed but utterly human. Personally, I think that's what makes it worth watching. It's not about Anthony Bourdain. It's about all of us, stumbling through life, trying to figure out who we are. And isn't that what the best stories are really about? Let me know what you think in the comments. Does Tony work for you? Or do you think it misses the mark? Let's talk about it.